There are players who enter the league with hype, and then there are players who enter with a kind of pressure that bends reality around them before they even touch the floor. Victor Wembanyama was not just another hyped prospect, the way that label gets thrown around every single draft cycle like it means something. The moment clips of this 7'4" kid in France started circulating, moving like a point guard, pulling up from logo range, swatting shots with either hand, something completely different was happening. People who had watched basketball their entire lives were genuinely struggling to find a comparison that fit. Scouts were saying he looked like he was designed in a laboratory specifically for this sport, piece by piece, built to break every defensive system ever invented. Nobody had seen buzz like this since a teenager from Akron showed up on the cover of Sports Illustrated before playing a single professional minute. And the wild part is that every person who watched him said the same thing. Unicorn still doesn't cover it. Alien still doesn't cover it. Nothing covers it. That kind of player only comes around once, and when they do, the whole sport shifts its axis just to accommodate what they're about to do. This was that moment, and the people who were paying attention knew it before he ever put on an NBA jersey. Before the NBA, before the draft lottery, before the billboards and the magazine covers, there was France, and France already knew what was coming long before the rest of the world caught up. Playing in the Pro A-League at an age when most kids are still figuring out high school basketball, he became the youngest MVP in league history while simultaneously winning Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. That is not something that happens in professional basketball at any level, winning the Best Offensive Player Award and the Best Defensive Player Award at the same time as a teenager. You could watch him in those games and see something that genuinely did not make logical sense. A player his size stepping out to hit threes off the dribble, bringing the ball up the floor smoothly, reading defenses like a veteran, and then turning around and erasing shots at the rim on the other end. His wingspan alone made it almost unfair, because even when defenders thought they had a clear window, the arm was already there, closing it. He moved like a guard trapped inside a giant's body, and neither the guard nor the giant was willing to give the other one the keys. Defenses in France ran out of answers fast, and when the NBA started streaming his games directly because they knew the world needed to see this, it became obvious that the conversation was about to get much bigger and much louder. Teams were already adjusting their draft boards. General managers were already having uncomfortable conversations about trading up, and the #1 pick hadn't even been decided yet. The league was preparing itself for someone it had genuinely never seen before, and that kind of preparation feels different from the usual draft excitement. They set up a showcase in Las Vegas specifically to put him in front of every NBA decision-maker at once, and he walked in and made it look like he had already done this 1,000 times. In one game, he dropped 37 points with 7 three-pointers and 5 blocks, like he was just running through a standard workout. The next game, he came back with 36 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 blocks. And at that point, people stopped using the word prospect entirely. That word implies potential, implies development, implies uncertainty about whether it all translates, and there was no uncertainty left in that building. A warning shot had been fired directly at every team in the NBA, and the message was simple. Figure out how you are going to deal with this, because it is coming, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. When the 2023 draft lottery results came in and San Antonio landed the pick, it felt almost too perfect, almost scripted by someone who appreciated the poetry of franchise history. The same organization that built empires around two of the greatest big men the sport has ever produced had just drawn the winning ticket for the next generation's most terrifying force. There was no debate about the selection. There was no drama. There was only the quiet certainty of an entire league understanding what had just happened and what it would mean for the next decade. History does not repeat itself often, but when it does, it has a way of choosing the right address. The rookie season started with no guarantees, no perfect setup, no veteran point guard engineering easy looks, no system built around his strengths, just a young roster still finding its identity, and one extraordinary player asked to carry more weight than any rookie should reasonably be asked to carry. None of that mattered to him in the slightest. 5 games into his NBA career, he exploded for 38 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 blocks against a Phoenix Suns team that was not some soft opponent showing up to get embarrassed. That was a real contender, built with real veterans, coached by people who had defensive schemes specifically designed to neutralize elite big men. He went through it like it was a scrimmage. With that performance, he stepped into exclusive company, joining only 2 other teenagers in NBA history who had ever put up 35 points, 10 boards, and multiple blocks in a single game. The names in that group are not ordinary names. They are names that get spoken with reverence. And suddenly, there was a new name being added while the player wearing it was still technically a teenager who barely unpacked his bags in San Antonio. Teams around the league started watching film differently after that night. Not the way you study a good player, but the way you study a problem you are not sure has a solution yet. The defensive adjustments started coming immediately, and he simply adjusted back faster than anyone expected. He was doing things in those early weeks that had never appeared on a box score before, combinations of production that the sports statisticians had to double-check because they seemed like data entry errors. Over a 6-game stretch in mid-November, he became the first player in league history to hit at least 23 threes and pile up 25 blocks simultaneously across that window. That number doesn't make sense when you look at it on paper because three-pointers and blocked shots belong to completely different categories of player in every defensive and offensive system ever designed. Guards hit threes, big men block shots, and never in the history of the sport has someone been dominant enough in both to make history in the same 6-game run. He was protecting the rim on one end of the floor and then stepping out to the arc and pulling up over smaller defenders on the other end. And neither of those things was a secondary function for him. Both were primary weapons being used at an elite level simultaneously. And every coach in the league was sitting in their film room trying to find a single defensive scheme that could address both threats at once. There is no such scheme, and the coaches who are honest will tell you that directly. You can protect the rim or you can protect the perimeter, but you cannot do both at the same time when the same player is threatening both at the same time. That realization was spreading through every front office in the league like a slow alarm. Then came November 13th against Washington, and what happened that night changed the entire conversation permanently. On paper, it was just a regular season game between a rebuilding team and an opponent with nothing particularly threatening on the roster, the kind of game that fills out a schedule and rarely gets remembered. But from the very first possession, something felt different. Something was visibly different in the way he was moving and hunting his spots and attacking before defenses had a chance to set themselves up. He was not waiting for plays to be run for him. He was not setting screens and catching lobs. He was operating as a primary creator, a scorer who could manufacture his own shot from anywhere on the floor, and doing it in a body that no defender on earth had the physical tools to match. Step-back threes, isolation mid-range, driving through contact and finishing cleanly, finding open teammates when the double team came, and then getting the ball back and going again. The 50 points came not as a sudden explosion, but as a steady, controlled, inevitable accumulation, the way a dam breaks not all at once, but through consistent, unstoppable pressure. By the time the final buzzer sounded, he had become the 4th youngest player in NBA history to reach 50 points in a game, joining a list of names tied to some of the most electric individual performances the sport has ever produced. A 7'4" player from France with insane expectations had not just met them that night, he had rendered them insufficient. The hype was no longer big enough to describe what was actually happening.
What made that 50-point night even more remarkable was everything that surrounded it, everything that was happening on both ends of the floor throughout the entire season, not just in that one game.